Hello everyone, I am Rahul and this presentation is going to be about requirement validation in software engineering. So before we begin, let us take a look at the topics we're going to cover. We start with some introduction and then we move on to requirement review and then requirements inspection. And then we take a look at test case generation followed by reading and then finishing off with prototyping. So let's start. So the introduction. As SRS document is the basis for software development, therefore the SRS must be well written. It should be complete and correct and should satisfy customer needs. Various stakeholders and team members are involved in writing the SRS document. The SRS document may contain errors and unclear requirements, which may be the result of human errors. The most common errors that occur in the SRS document are omission inconsistency, incorrect fact, and ambiguity. Requirements validation is an iterative process in the requirements development process, which ensures that customer requirements are accurately and clearly specified in the SRS document. Therefore, various methods of requirement validation which are discussed are as follows. So, the first is requirements review. Requirements review is a formal process of requirement validation, which is performed by a group of people. It involves readers from both sides, clients and developers. At the beginning of the requirements review process, a review plan is prepared in which the review team is selected. Time and place of the meeting are decided. The review documents are distributed to the review team members. The team members read the relevant documents before the review meeting for any problems. Requirement review is one of the most widely used and successful techniques to detect errors in requirements. Companies design their review processes according to their needs. Requirements review helps to address problems at early stages of software development. Although requirement reviews take time, but they pay back by minimizing the changes and alteration in the software. The review team usually checks the SRS for completeness and consistency. The review meeting is then held to discuss the individual comments and problems and some set of actions to resolve the problem. Follow-up actions are taken to ensure whether the agreed actions are followed or not. Lastly, the final document is revised for acceptance or reviews. Requirement inspection. Requirement inspection is similar to requirement reviews. It is an effective way for requirement validation that detects at early stages. All the documents to be inspected are made available by the moderator before the inspection begins. The organization holds the inspection meeting, inspectors understand the documents and identify the defects in the requirement artifacts. The producer who has developed the SRS explains the documents to be inspected in front of the inspectors if needed. Otherwise, the reader presents, explains and interprets the material. Defects are collected, documented and compiled by the recorder. Reinspection is done if any confusion or conflict arises. Defects are corrected on the basis of the feedback provided by the inspectors. Inspection is a costly and time-consuming process because large number of requirements artifacts are analyzed, searched, and sorted. Inspection can detect up to 90% defects. The inspection process correctly gives results for small and less complex projects. It is a non-common practice in industry due to the cost which is associated to it. So the third one is test case generation. Another technique for violating requirements is test case generation. The purpose of this technique is to ensure that requirements are good enough for the project and planning activities. It removes the defects before a project starts and during the project execution and development. In this technique, the product manager and the tester select and review the high priority requirements and least priority requirements are discarded in the initial specification. Inspection of the requirements is performed by creating test cases for the requirements. Black box test cases are created that require knowledge of the requirements instead of the internal details of the software product. Writing test cases early may result in some rework if the requirements change, but this rework cost will be lower than finding and fixing defects in the later stages. Test case based validation is beneficial for the minimization of resources and reuse of software artifacts and personnel. So the next one is reading. Reading is a technique of reviewing requirements in which the reader applies his or her knowledge to find the defects. There are various reading techniques such as ad hoc based, checklist based, etc. In ad hoc based reading, documents to be reviewed are given to the reviewers for review without any guidelines. Detection of the defect depends upon the knowledge and experience of the reviewer. Checklist-based reading is one of the commonly used techniques in which a set of questions is given to the reviewer as a checklist. Checklist-based reading covers the quality characteristics of the requirements. For example, some of the questions for a checklist are as follows. Ambiguity: does the individual requirement have different interpretations? Understandability are the specified terms defined in the glossary. Completeness: if any requirement is referenced, is it described elsewhere in the document? Redundancy: are there any contradictions in the requirement? Testability: is each requirement testable? Modifiability: are future modifications possible in the document specified? Traceability: is each requirement easily identified? And the another one is prototyping. Prototyping is most commonly used to understand, analyze, and validate the requirements of a system. In requirement validation, prototyping helps to identify the errors such as missing, incomplete, and incorrect requirements in the requirement document. Prototyping works with the development of an executable model of the proposed system in an incremental manner. In each increment, defects are identified and discussed with the stakeholders, and corrective actions are taken accordingly. If there is any problem in the requirements, the analyst may move to the analysis and elicitation phase to clarify the requirements. The conclusion: validating the requirements helps check issues related to the requirements specified. During previous activities of requirements engineering, usually the validation is used to identify errors in the initial phases of the development cycle related to misunderstandings in the requirements gathering process. Validation ensures accuracy and clarity in the data by mitigating any defects in the requirement collected. Without validation, there is a high risk of inaccurate data, which would result in inaccurate outcomes that will lead to stakeholders rejecting the system after it has been built, which implies delays and overcosts that could have been avoided. A strong base ensures a robust project structure and reduced changes of failures and rejections. That is the conclusion. Thank you.